it's probably never as cheap as advertising. I read these expat things and they're like, oh, you can live in Portugal on $800 a month. And I'm thinking, and I see there's Costa. Oh, you can live in Costa Rica on 1,200. I'm like, well, maybe. I wouldn't want to live here on $1,200 a month. My original intent was to retire abroad. I had always planned on that during my working career. So I traveled a lot to Europe, some to Central America, not as much because I'd always planned to go to Europe. Unfortunately, a life change event changed that for me, and I ended up searching on the internet for nice places to live, and Nicaragua popped up. I had never heard of it, and I think you know that Nicaragua has a sort of a seedy reputation, maybe a little more dangerous. I don't know, but anyway, I went with my children in 2007. It was beautiful. The ocean was warm, the landscape, volcanoes. Living in California, I spoke a little bit of Spanish. My daughter's fluent in Spanish, so it was an easy transition, and the kids liked it. My son liked it a lot. He likes the ocean. So I bought a piece of land there. And over the years, we built a house overlooking the Pacific Ocean in San Juan del Sur. And in 2016, when I retired, when my son got out of high school, I moved there. And I lived there for almost 6 years. And I did leave because of the political situation. Daniel Ortega, the president, and the people had a difference of opinion on several things. And there was a violent uprising in 2018 that resulted in like 350 deaths at the hands of the government and almost 2,000 people incarcerated and in jail. And at that time, I thought, it's probably not a good place to like stay. And I didn't really want to spend money there and support the Ortega regime because, you pay taxes and that goes to support the regime. So I started planning my exit. And 2021, I pulled the trigger. I was going to go to Europe, but I was not able to because I have 2 dogs. And you cannot take a dog from Nicaragua to the U.S. or to Europe because Nicaragua is a high rabies risk country. So I decided, okay, what choices do I have? I can leave my dogs. Well, that wasn't going to happen. And I started doing some other research, and it turns out that even though Costa Rica border was 45 minutes from my home, Costa Rica is not a high rabies risk country. And my plan was to take my dogs, rent a place here for 6 months, get them vaccinated here and chipped here, and then they'd be Tico dogs, right? And then I was going to move to Europe. But I got here. It was nice. I liked the people a lot, both the Ticos and the expat community. The expat community here is different than in Nicaragua. It seems more well-educated, probably more liberal-leaning in their political views. So it kind of fit me better. And then the Ukrainian war broke out in Europe. And that was when I decided, I'll just buy some land here and build a little place and see what happens. And I've kind of been here ever since. It's a beautiful community.
What's the price difference between Nicaragua and Costa Rica? And is the political situation cleared up in Nicaragua, or is that also still similar? I was in Costa Rica for like 6 months, and I was dating this girl from Venezuela, and she bought a house in Costa Rica, and she told me she's going to sell it because Costa Rica started reminding her of Venezuela. So how much better is the political situation?
The political situation here is more stable. The U.S. dollar is not stable right now in Costa Rica. It's taken a free fall over the last 2 years. So it makes it seem more expensive because you don't get the exchange rate that we had in 2022. It peaked out at almost 700 colones to the dollar, and now it's like 500. So your buying power, I mean, it's a 20% plus inflation, right, against the dollar. So there's that. Housing compared to Nicaragua, it's more expensive here, but it's not prohibitively more expensive if you're shopping in the high-end private communities. Like here where I live in Sierra Luna, houses would probably sell for, again, it depends on the size house. Like the castle down the street from me just sold for over $1 million. But it's huge. It's 5,000 or 6,000 square feet. It's 6 bedrooms. You can get a house at Atenas for 200 to 350,000, a nice 3-bedroom house. It's similar to Nicaragua. Nicaragua may be cheaper, but not all that much cheaper. You can do in Nicaragua under 300K. I sold my house there, and it took 2.5 years to sell it, and I sold it for $330,000. But it was 4,000 square foot home overlooking the Pacific Ocean. Okay, 4 bedrooms, 4.5 bathrooms, swimming pool. I mean, in Santa Barbara, it would have fetched millions, right? Nicaragua, 330K.
So you went from living on the beach in Nicaragua to now you're in Costa Rica. You're more inland. You're more in the mountains, right?
I'm up in the mountains. I overlook Alajuela and San Jose to the south, and to the north that's more rugged, more on, it's undeveloped. I'm at, I think, almost 3,000 feet above sea level. I have 1.25 acres of land with close to 1,000 coffee plants on it, which I don't really do anything with, but I have beautiful views, just not of the ocean. And from the ocean, I can be there in 1 hour and 15 minutes by car, so it's not bad. I have friends that live on the coast, then I'll go visit them. I just leave at 8 o'clock in the morning, and I can stay all day and come home.
When I first started traveling, I would always hear like, oh, you could live in like Costa Rica or Thailand on like $1,000 a month. I mean, what would you say to someone that says that?
You wouldn't be happy. I don't know about
Right.
Okay. I've been in Thailand, but I was only there for 6 weeks, so I really couldn't, make that statement. But I know in Costa Rica, I live comfortably, and I spend a couple $1,000s a month. Okay. Being from California, I like higher end wines, so there's a gourmet wine shop in Atenas, but I buy $20 to $25 bottle of wine. I don't buy cheap stuff. And I'm a vegetarian, so I don't buy meat. But yeah, I spend anywhere from $1,500 to $2,300 a month, and I live very comfortable with that. And that includes internet, cell phone, electricity, and propane gas for the stove. Going out to eat probably once a week, so it's not bad. That doesn't include like vacations, obviously. I do go to Europe once a year. I have an apartment in Zagreb, so I'll go there. That's, whatever the airfare is, plus living in Croatia, which is actually cheaper than here. I find the food's cheaper, wine, good wine, and, equal bottle of wine is probably $8 less, $7, $8 less. The euro to the dollar has been very constant. I think it's like $1.10 gets you a euro. And then the public transportation there is cheap. It's a little bit cheaper cost of living wise, I think.
Do you think that you'll eventually move to Europe then, once, say, the Ukraine war gets resolved and maybe that area settles down a little bit?
That's a tough question. My children, they have their Croatian heritage and they love it there. And the coast is absolutely beautiful. We had a house on an island, and small island, no cars. I think the full-time population there was like 4,000 people living in 3 little villages. You could walk around the island in an hour. It was really small, but it's cold in the winter. And here we have a wonderful climate year round. This is April. It's the hottest month. And it's the same in Nicaragua. I don't have air conditioning here. I don't need it. Some people have it, but in the evenings, it's generally 68 to 74, which is quite comfortable. In April during the day, it can be 90. Hot and dry. That's a tough month.
So, Allie, if you're in Nicaragua and you're on the beach and now you're more in that cooler climate, do you miss the beach? Like, do you ever think about then maybe headed back down to the beach? Or do you feel like at this point in your life, you like being in a little bit more temperate climate?
I do like the more temperate climate. And when I was younger, I was more active with ocean sports, surfing and swimming. I still swim, but I won't surf anymore. Surfing, it can be a really hard sport if you take a good tumble. I'm working on 70. I think surfing is not for me anymore. I like it here. I hike a lot. I hike about 7 to 8 miles a day with my dog. So the transition to the mountains has been good for me.
So you're 69 pushing 70. Is that what you said?
67. Working on 70, yeah.
You're working on 70. So you're 67, right? So when you were thinking about retiring, what were like some of the biggest things that you considered? And if someone was thinking about moving, not just say to Nicaragua or Costa Rica, Europe, what are the things that they really should consider?
Some of the things they should consider that I really didn't: healthcare. It's nice to have hospitals that are within 30 minutes. When I was in San Juan, it was 2 hours to Managua, if you were seriously injured. So that's, I think, something you should really think about. And the quality of healthcare. Private healthcare in Nicaragua is really good. Go to Vivian Palos Hospital or the military hospital. They're both private. I had an insurance policy with Vivian Palos Hospital. I had 2 surgeries there. They were cheap. I had my gallbladder removed. It was like $2,000. I was in the hospital for 3 days. So the healthcare is really good. Most of the doctors are educated in Spain, and then they'll do interns in the US. And they all pretty much speak English, so that's nice. I speak Spanish, but when you're communicating with the doctor, it's always better, I think, in your native language. Culture, Nicaragua's beautiful. Culture is very different. It's not European culture. It's not like the culture we're used to in America. It's Latino culture. It's different. And I think you need to think about that and how you fit in with the locals. I think it's really important to have a handle on the language too. I know people here that don't speak Spanish, and they get really frustrated. And then you have to be accepting of things will happen in Nicaragua. Like, you will be stopped for a traffic violation, but it's basically the police officers looking for a few dollars. That doesn't happen in Costa Rica. They do their job. They often let you go, but they're not looking for bribes here. So that's different. I just say medical culture, the kind of culture you want to live is important. The lifestyle you want to have. Like when I retired, I was like, I'm just going to go to the beach. I'm going to hang out, and watch the flowers blow, that kind of thing. That gets boring after a couple of years. So I think it's important to plan on what kind of activities are in the area. Like in San Jose, there's a theater, and they have ballet there. They have music up there, opera. There's some museums in San Jose. We didn't really have that in Nicaragua. And if you like that kind of thing, I love the museums. I like music.
So how important is it being close to major airports? Did you factor that in, or did it just happen that you live close to an international airport?
So how I found Atenas, and I'm really not going to kid you here. I was leaving Nicaragua, and I had these 2 dogs, and they're big, rescue dogs from Nicaragua. They're not huge, but they're solid 60, 65-pound American Staffordshire boxer mixes. And I wanted to actually rent closer to the Nicaraguan border near Liberia, but I couldn't find anything that would accept dogs. So I started expanding the search. Will you accept dogs? Do you have a walled-in yard? And I found a place in Atenas. So it was just kind of like dumb luck, And then I started to research Atenas, and I was like, oh, best climate in the world per National Geographic. It's basically less than an hour to San Jose, 45 minutes to the airport. And I thought, okay, that kind of checks off the boxes. But I didn't purposely choose the mountain area. I would have been quite happy on the coast of the Guanacaste coast, the closer to Nicaragua. So it was kind of dumb luck.
Yeah, I found your initial opening story interesting in the sense where you're talking about how you had these dogs and then you wanted to leave, but due to the status of the dogs, you couldn't take them to Europe or other places. There's so many different things that you don't know about traveling until you're there. But then you find like this workaround. It's like, okay, I'll just go to Costa Rica for 6 months, and then it opened up these other opportunities where then you could have went to Europe. But it's like there's so many things that you just don't know, right? Until
it's very hard to plan, and
yeah,
you have to be flexible, right? If you're going to be a successful expat, you have to be flexible, and you really have to understand that it's not the United States. Like, people do things here the way they do things. And if they tell you, I'm going to be at your place tomorrow at 9:00, they might be. And they might come at 9:00 at night. Mañana. We call it Tico time or Nika time. It's the way it is. And I have a lot of friends from the States that just frustrates them to no end. They I can't stand it. And they drive it. Oh my God. People who drive here, they're super polite. Okay, so if there's like traffic, cross traffic, and you're at a stop sign, people with the right of way will stop to let you turn, and they'll like clog the traffic behind them that has the right of way just to let four or five people come out and go. You know, I told my son, I said, if you ever come down here and he hasn't been to Costa Rica yet, he'll come. I said, when you drive, do not flash your lights at somebody because somebody will probably pull out in front of you. Because when you flash your lights, it means to the people at the stop sign, you can pull out in front of me. I'll let you go. That's not what it means in the States, right?
Did you ever think about retiring in California or Florida or Arizona or Texas or something? Or did you never even consider the States?
I never considered retiring in the United States. I felt California was too crowded. The California taxes are onerous, and housing is very expensive there. I had a house out in the Santa Barbara area. My daughter took over the mortgage and made a courtesy payment to me on it, and so she has that house now. Yeah, I just the school shootings and the gun violence, and it just isn't a place for me. Right. I have a friend, a good close friend, and her best friend was killed at Sandy Hook in 2012. For me, I don't really understand what's going on. I'm a kid from the 60s, right? Things were so different when I was growing up. It was like you could go out on your bicycle, you were always safe, schools were safe, the neighborhood was safe, everybody knew everybody. Now it's very, very different. So as it changed, in the early 2000s, I had pretty much made up my mind. I'm not retiring in the U.S. At that time, I wasn't sure where I was going to retire. Europe was my preference. I traveled to Europe quite a bit, and that didn't pan out, so I ended up in Central America. But it takes a mindset, and you have to be flexible. You have to be willing to try to understand a foreign language. You're going to get pulled over by the police sooner or later, and usually they're really nice. I've never had a bad, experience. Yes, I paid a bribe, but they're polite. And it's just a business deal. But you have to be you have to be ready for that. And there are things that you won't understand. I'm pretty fluent in Spanish, and there's still things that I don't quite get when I'm out, like in the mercados or the open air markets. You're negotiating for something, and I don't know all the slang, so to speak.
Do you feel safer in Central America than you did when you were towards the end when you were in California in that Santa Barbara area? Or
I always felt safe in Santa Barbara. There are areas in LA I used to go that made me very nervous. In Managua, which is a pretty rough city, during the day, I felt completely safe, even at Mercado Oriental, which I think is the largest open-air mercado in all of Central America. It's huge, miles. It just goes on forever. You can pretty much buy anything you want there, from car parts to iguanas for the dinner table. It's pretty terrible. I wouldn't go in there at night, but during the day, I felt pretty safe. San Jose, I won't go there at night. San Jose has, I don't want to put people off to Costa Rica, but there is kind of an ongoing fentanyl trade in San Jose, and there's drug-related violence, some gang violence. So my suggestion is go with friends when you go to San Jose. Go during the day, you're perfectly safe. If you're going out for dinner, be with friends, be vigilant, and you'll probably be fine. I've gone to operas there at night. I've gone to reggae festivals and been there at night, and I've never felt like I was in danger. But, you have to be vigilant. And if you're going out to a restaurant, you need to have a designated driver. Somebody has to say, okay, I won't have drinks tonight. I'll be the eyes for the group kind of thing. Because, like, frankly, you stick out. You're an expat. You stick out. I don't wear expensive jewelry in town. Don't flash money, that kind of thing. It's just a common sense things, right? I do the same thing in Europe. And in Europe, I sort of fit in. But I still don't flash jewelry or money or anything like that.
Let's just say someone's going to retire from the U.S., this year, next year. Do you think it was easier to assimilate into Nicaragua or into Costa Rica? No difference? Same?
They're very close. Probably easier in Costa Rica because more people speak English. The expat communities, like I said, they fit me better because they're generally more well-educated that have similar political views that I have. I avoid talking politics for the most part with, people here, because it's just, you never know when you're going to run into somebody that has an opposing view. And I don't like that confrontation kind of thing. It was very easy for me to assimilate into Costa Rica. I have a lot of good friends here. But it was easy for me in Nicaragua. But I'll be fundamentally honest, in Nicaragua, I preferred hanging out with the Nicas than the expats. I found the expats in Nicaragua and San Jose to be particularly abrasive. I knew a lot of people there that were like, I don't need to speak Spanish. I don't need to really respect any of the people's customs here. It was a very different group of expats. They just were there to do whatever they wanted to do, and felt like, Nicaragua's kind of lawless. I don't have to follow any laws, so I can just do whatever I want.
So you think the expats in Costa Rica are nicer, a little more acclimated to Costa Rica than the expats in Nicaragua?
Yeah, I totally do. And I'm not saying all the expats in Nicaragua are bad. I have some very good friends over there that I still see. I have a friend coming to see me in probably July when the house is finished. I would go back and visit friends there for sure. It's kind of an in general thing. Like, most of the expats are like not the people I would hang out with.
We met through a mutual friend, through Mary Ellen, who's friends with my parents. And Mary Ellen has been on this podcast as well, if anyone's looking for information on Panama. But basically, my parents have been semi-retired in Panama, the country, for the last 20 years. And when I go visit them, I'd run into a lot of their friends. They retired from the U.S. Then their first destination was actually Costa Rica. And they had awful experiences until they ended up in Panama. They said Panama was quite a bit cheaper. Some of them would lose their house from the government. They'd be like, well, I filled out a form wrong. And all of a sudden, I had this $900,000 condo stolen from, have you ever heard any, but it wasn't just it was one or two people. I probably ran into 30 people that had horror stories of Costa Rica. Have you ever heard any stories like that?
I don't really know that many people in Panama. I have been told it's very nice and that it's more affordable than Costa Rica. I would believe that. I haven't heard horror stories about people losing their properties in Costa Rica, but I can tell you in Nicaragua, you ever watch House Hunters International?
I have, yeah. I have definitely seen that show, Ellie.
There was a couple, and they were actually from Santa Barbara, and they were looking to buy in Nicaragua, and they bought in Nicaragua at a place called Pelican Eyes. Beautiful condominium resort, overlooks the San Juan, Half Moon Harbor. Stunning. Well, as it turns out, the owner and his accountant were selling the condos multiple times. So each condo would have, I think in the end, they determined that the typical condo had been sold to 8 different people. And the owner fled. He was eventually caught. I believe he's in jail now. The accountant, I don't know if he's ever been caught or not. He fled with a lot of money. And then the Nicaraguan courts basically turned it into a 1/8 timeshare for all the people that bought. So they were buying, they weren't $1 million or $900,000 condos, but they were probably, $250,000 or up to $500,000, because it was in this really nice resort. And so they put, say, $400,000 in it. Now they have 1/8 of $400,000, and they can use it 1/8 of the year or something. That's not what they bought. That's the biggest horror story I've heard. And it's sad. When I bought the land here, I went through with an attorney. My deed is registered in the municipality. I think everything's on the up and up. When I sold my property in Nicaragua, it sold relatively well. It took 2.5 years to get a contract, but once we had the contract, it went through with very little problems. There were a couple of repairs that had to be made. There was an area where the fence was over onto the neighbor's property that had to be fixed, but nothing you wouldn't have in the States, maybe.
So how much money again did you say that you bought your house for in Costa Rica? Was it something like $300,000?
I sold my house in Nicaragua for $330,000. Before the insurrection, the houses were going for, my house, I would have marketed it for around $500,000 and probably gotten $450,000 for it.
Wow.
But after the insurrection, housing prices took a pretty big back, and then COVID came. Here, I'm building a house not that big, like 1,650 square feet, and the property I bought is 1.25 acres. And when all is said and done, I will have between $350,000 and $400,000 invested into it.
As we mentioned before, but just to kind of clarify, you're a little bit in the mountains. Let's say you were going to buy something, like a house in Jaco or Guanacaste, or what's the town past Limon, Puerto Viejo, one of these more maybe like popular Costa Rica beach towns. Or are you familiar with the prices?
I am not familiar with the prices. No. It's funny you asked though, because I have a friend from Bermuda, and we're all going to Guanacaste probably next month, and the gal from Bermuda is looking to buy some real estate, and she's going to look at houses, and we're going with her. Just not good timing. I think it all depends. The rule of thumb here is like $1,000 a square meter.
1,000 a square meter. Okay.
That's kind of the rule of thumb. That's what everybody says, and you go from there, negotiate from there. I've seen houses in Atenas listed for well in excess of $1 million, and they're beautiful. And I'm sure it's the same in Jaco, and in the more private communities, the expat communities, the houses tend to be bigger and probably better built. And I think on the coast you have to be very careful, because, like, if a house is on the beach, you have to have government authorization to be able to repair it. Okay. And they only get that for a certain number of years. And I think they're actually trying to get rid of all the houses that have been built on the beach. They want to return that to nature. They don't want anybody having, like, living on the beach. And I have a friend, she was looking at a house on the beach, and it was a small place and it needed repairs. And she had an exemption. There was an exemption that was going to be sold with the house for, like, it was valid for 5 years, so that she could paint it and do repairs for 5 years. And she was going to pay $150,000 for it, which is not that much money, but it was small, but it was right on the beach. But after 5 years, she would have to reapply for the exemption to, repair it, and might not get it. The government might say, you know what? No, we're going to let that house fall apart, collapse back into the sea. So I think the moral of that story is you need to be very careful when you're buying on the beach. Back up in the foothills, it's a different story.
Yeah, as I mentioned before, how my parents kind of moved to Panama over 20 years ago. They have very few people that they know. Actually, I don't think they know a single person from when they actually moved to Panama that's still there. Most of them end up having, as you talked about before, about healthcare, but they had some type of health emergency, and they're just like, damn, like I could die here if I have a heart attack or something. And I kind of tell the story. My mom had they're 90 minutes outside of Panama City. She was on a ladder, fell off the ladder, had a compound fracture, went to the local clinic, which is like 2 minutes away. It was very close. They didn't know how to treat it. Had to drive the 90 minutes in traffic it was actually over 90 minutes to Panama City. Went to a local hospital. Of course, no one speaks English. I was actually there at the time, so this isn't like I'm hearing this. I was actually present for this story, but you go to a window in very, poor Spanish that I had at the time. This is one of the reasons I went to the Spanish immersion school in Costa Rica, because I was like, man, if you don't speak Spanish in one of these countries, it could be death. But you go pay the $3, go to another window, waiting in line. It's just a complete shit show. But imagine if that would have been a heart attack, or imagine if that would have been something, more severe. You're dead. Like you're not. And so a lot of my parents' friends, I noticed I think my mom told me one day that the average expat, based on the people she's talked to, stays for about 7 years. And then they kind of have one of these.
But I think you're right. I know not a lot of people here, but I had friends. Jerry was 76, and Leanne, I forget how she was younger, but they started having health problems, and they moved back. They're in Florida. I don't really speak Spanish, is what Jerry said. He goes, I feel lost, and it's just better back in the States for me because of the health. They sold their place, and it sold really quickly here, and they're still going back and forth, but they'll be settled in Florida relatively soon.
You said you're 67, so you're my parents are 67, so you're the same age. And I think I talked to my mom. I'm like, well, how much longer are you going to stay in Panama? And they're like, oh, until we feel old. Even with that whole accident I told you, it didn't scare them off. They're just like, well, that was kind of a freak thing. We'll come back. But they're not even in their 70s. As you just mentioned, your friend is in his 70s. I think you think differently. I used to live in Asia, and I was in Cambodia, and I was at this coffee shop, and it was full, and this like guy, he's like, hey, can I share a table with you? And I was like, yeah. I was this older guy. He had to be mid 70s, and he retired to Cambodia. And I was like, oh, really? How was that? I talked to him for a while, and he's like, oh, moving back. I'm actually just sold my house or my condo, whatever. And I was like, what's the reason? You don't like it here? He's like, oh, I love it here. He's like, it's the time difference. He's like, at my age, I have friends and family members that are passing on, and I constantly go back to the States. And he's like, the time difference is so big. He's like, at my age, the time I get readjusted, then I have to go back. He's like, I'm always living in jet lag. So he went back because of the time difference.
When I went to Thailand a few years ago, I want to say it was 7-hour flight to Dubai is where I had my stop off, and then another 5 hours to Thailand. And then I called somebody, and I'm like, what time is it over there? It was like noon, and they're like, it's like midnight. So it's like literally on the other side of the planet. Yeah, I thought about Asia, but the time thing, I just don't think I can do that. It's just so far away. When I was in Thailand, it was almost a waste of a trip, because I went post-COVID, and when I bought my tickets, they said, yeah, you got to set like a 5 to 7 day quarantine, and then you're free. Well, mine turned into 2 weeks because the COVID just went wild, after I bought the ticket. And then I couldn't leave Bangkok, so I was in Bangkok for 5 weeks. So much for my trip to Thailand. But, Bangkok's a cool city, although pretty much everything was closed. People were super nice. Food was very interesting. I'd go back, but I don't think I'd ever want to live there. Costa Rica is 5 or 6 hours to California. We're 1 hour time difference right now, I think. So that's very tolerable. I can Skype with the grandkids. If there's an emergency, I can get there in a reasonable amount of time. So, but yeah, that is a consideration. Like, so I even think that about Europe. It's 8 hours difference, I guess, 8 or 9 hours, depending on day time.
So at 67 years old, are you also collecting? I mean, you get, what is it, Medic? What's the one for older retired people in the U.S.? Is it Medicare or Medicaid? I always get those two confused.
That was a big deal for me, because at 65, you have to take Part D, I think it is. Part B is free, or Part D is free, and you have to buy the other one monthly. But you can't use it outside the United States. So I made the decision that I'm not going to pay into it. Okay, so now I'm into, if I ever go back to the States, I have to pay a 10% penalty for each year that I didn't pay into it. So, a couple of years into that, and it's what it is. But I just decided, I really feel in my heart that I will probably be an expat forever. I just don't see going back to the States. Maybe when I'm old and decrepit, they have to throw me in an old folks home. Maybe. I don't know. That's a tough call. I don't want to. So
that's the thing people don't realize. Like, you actually have to, pay into it whether you're using it or not, right? I mean, it's kind of a...
Or you choose not to, but if you ever need to, then you're going to pay a penalty.
Are you collecting Social Security?
I am not. I passed my full retirement age, and my current plan is to wait till 70.
You're going to basically wait for the maximum.
Yeah. I have a pension from my working years. I haven't started taking that either, because I qualify for it in January 1st, 2025 for the full pension. So
let's just hypothetically say that you were collecting that Social Security. Is there any taxes you'd have to pay on that in Costa Rica?
You're tax exempt up to $109,000 in Costa Rica.
Oh, really? Okay.
I think that's the number. So as long as you stay under that, you don't need to pay tax. You do have to pay the CAHA. And the CAHA is the social medical system. They base that on your income. So if you're collecting Social Security, you show them your Social Security payment, and they'll tell you what your payment is. I want to say it can be as little as like $80 a month, and I don't think there's a maximum. But if you have a pretty good income, or you're collecting a large amount of Social Security, you can pay a couple $100 a month. But your medications are free. You can go to specialists. It's a pretty good system. Um, like any system, you have to go and make an appointment. I have an app on my phone. I can you go into the Kaha and I want to see a dermatologist, and I'm in a TANF, and it'll pull someone up that's close, and I make an appointment. It's generally 2 to 3 weeks, But if you have an emergency, you just go right to the local health center, and that's good. I've been there twice. Once to get a COVID vaccine, there was no charge for that, and then I went because I had an allergic reaction to ant bites. I got stung by like 100 ants, and I started foaming at the mouth. I had trouble breathing, anaphylactic reaction to it, and they drugged me there, and my friend of mine took me, and they wheeled me in a wheelchair, and they gave me an EpiPen, and made me sit there for 3 hours while they watched me, and when they were satisfied that I was going to be okay, they wheeled me out and said, "Have a nice day," and there was no charge for it. I don't know. It's a pretty good system, but it faces financial issues just like in the States with Social Security. That's all over the world that way. But yeah, I'm happy with the quality of medical care here. I guess if I had a serious problem, I would probably go to SEMA Hospital, or there's another Catholic hospital. They're private hospitals, and just pay. And the costs here are probably half that of the States. I know somebody, they paid like $80,000 for a pacemaker here. I was like, damn. That's a lot of money. And their programs, we have La Linea Vida, Lifeline, and you pay, I want to say it's $49 a month, and they have doctors that give you discounts, private doctors, but they have an ambulance service, and I don't subscribe to it, but if you have a medical condition that needs an ambulance, they come out and get you and take you to San Jose. So that's a pretty good, business. I think there's a lot of expats here that are in that. They also have something called MetaSmart, and you get discounts at doctors and pharmacies with it, and that costs like $10 a month, kind of thing.
So the area you're in, you said about 45 minutes, an hour outside of San Jose, which is the capital of Costa Rica. How many expats are out there, and how many expat friends do you have for Costa Ricans or, Ticas?
I'm going to say like 2 to 1 expats to Ticas.
And then how big is the expat community out there? Are you talking like 100 or larger?
It's in the hundreds. I don't know. Like I live in Serra Luna. We have 10 lots. It used to be a coffee plantation, coffee farm up on the hillside. And the owner turned it into 10 lots. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's 6 houses built up in here. And it's a gated community. And they're all owned by expats. But of the 6 houses, only 4 are actually occupied right now. One of them is owned by a Tico. So it's probably a 3 to 1, I guess. 2 to 1, 3 to 1 for me in terms of Ticos to expats. I mean, when I go into town, I have 2 dogs, and they're both people friendly, but one of them is she's animal challenged, and she's a big girl. So I don't take her out of the yard except for little walks. I don't take her to town. My other one is very friendly and well behaved and listens and doesn't cause problems. So she goes everywhere with me. And the Ticos love dogs. So like I'm out walking and Ticos come up like, "Hi, Coco." They don't know my name. They know my dog's name.
Right.
So I probably know a lot more Ticos than I realize I know. You know what I mean? But yeah, the Ticos are very friendly. I think trustworthy. There's always bad apples, right? Everywhere you go in the States, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, Croatia. There's, they're bad apples. They're bad players. But by and large, they're happy and trustworthy people, in my opinion.
I mean, you basically left Nicaragua because you mentioned the political situation changed. Do you ever foresee a political situation changing in Costa Rica where, as I mentioned earlier, when I was dating this girl from Venezuela in Costa Rica, and she basically was selling her house because she's like, yeah, this just reminding me of Venezuela. Do you think that Costa Rica is going to be stable for the foreseeable future? Or when you're saying the purchasing power compared to the dollars decreased, do you have any fear that you're going to have to eventually leave there, or do you feel confident in the political situation?
I don't know the answer to that. They have free elections here. The people do seem to really partake in that. If I'm here for 8 years, I would take citizenship. I think it would be worth having. I don't know. I know that Chavez is the president right now. There are a lot of people that are upset with him because he has let the dollar devalue here. He has not tried to prop it up. It's hammering the tourist industry, all the industries that export. They get paid in dollars, but they have to pay their employees in colones, and they're losing money hand over fist. They're in the government tourist industry. Last month there were over 500 layoffs, and they're projecting another 1,000 this month. And they're pleading with them to change the policy to push it back up to like 600 colones to the dollar from 500. They feel that that's an area where they'll be able to make ends meet, from a business point of view. But yeah, businesses are closing. I worry about the local economy. Not for me. I have an income in U.S. dollars, so I'll be fine. But yeah, I don't know. I just got bad. I'd sell and go again.
Yeah, we touched on the language just a little bit, but let's just say hypothetically that you just retired, you don't speak any Spanish minus like, hola and a couple, a couple words, right? Would you recommend they take a course before they come here? Or do you think it might be too big of a barrier to overcome if they're not really willing to learn some countries are just a lot easier to get by with English than others.
You can get by with just English here in Costa Rica, but you're not going into any of the rural areas where people don't really speak English, and don't want to read about a gringo that doesn't speak Spanish. I applied for residency here. I did all my documentation myself. I went to immigration myself. I had an interview in Spanish with them. It was not easy. I had a headache when I left. Right. I started studying Spanish. Living in California, you pick up words, right? Donde está el baño? That kind of thing. But I started studying after we bought the property in Nicaragua. And I took lessons in Nica. When I would go for vacation, I would go take lessons. And I did that for about 3 years. And I get along okay. I mean, I can use the telephone and speak to people on the telephone and get what I need. That was my biggest accomplishment. If I can talk to somebody in Spanish on the telephone, I'm okay. I think strongly that no matter what country you go to, you should try to learn some of the language. Like I know phrases in Hrvatski, which is the language they use in Croatia. It's really hard. And every time I try to say something there, everybody just starts speaking English to me. Because they're like, yeah, shit, no, she speaks English. So some places are easier than others. Like Croatia's super easy. Everybody speaks English. Germany, everybody speaks English. Somebody told me once in Germany, I was over there. I said something about some guy was talking to me in German. They said, how old was he? I said, I don't know, about 50. And they said, nah, he speaks English. I said, how do you really? And she said, in Germany, if anybody's younger than 50, this was a long time ago. If they tell you they don't speak English, they're lying to you. They just don't want to talk to you. I think you need to make the effort to try some of the language.
And I think for a lot of people, they have these ideas of like, oh, I'm going to retire to Portugal, or I'm going to retire to Costa Rica, I'm going to retire to Panama, and I'm going to move there, and it's going to be easy, and it's going to be cheaper, and I'm going to have a bunch of friends. In my experiences traveling, I think it's just no place is as cheap as you think it is. Unless you speak the local language, it's a lot harder to integrate. And you have residency issues or, visa issues and things like that. What would you say to someone that just is like, oh, yeah, this is easy?
Well, if anybody says it's going to be easy, it won't be as easy as they think. You're always going to have a bad Tico day, where you go to immigration and it's closed, but it's supposed to be open. That's a really bad day. Where you get there and there's just a line around the block. You have to deal with it. It's never always easy. Sometimes just going I go shop at a place called Coupe, and I was going in the other day and there was a car accident on the bridge. You have these little one-way bridges. Well, I wasn't going to get to Coupe that day. Wasn't an easy day, right? There's just things that always happen, and it's never easy. It's probably never as cheap as advertised. Like, I read these expat things, and they're like, "Oh, you can live in Portugal on $800 a month." And I'm thinking, and I see there's Costa. Oh, you can live in Costa Rica on 1,200. I'm like, well, maybe. I wouldn't want to live here on $1,200 a month. You know, I'm right now. I'm watching what I spend because I'm building a house, but I don't like watching what I spend. And if I'm in a place where it's so expensive that like I have to watch, that just make it fun. That it's just one more stress. I have to, oh Lord, can I buy that this month? Kind of thing. But when I moved to Nicaragua, that was like the last thing I wanted to have to deal with. I had set up my budgets, and I felt like, okay, I can live on that, and I was easily within the budget I have. I live easily within the budget I have here every month. But I wouldn't want to be like on the edge. It just takes all the relaxation out of it. If I want to be stressed, I would have stayed in the States.
One of my buddies, he married, his wife's from Chile, and when he has people that tell him like, oh, you can live in, Costa Rica, Peru, whatever, for $1,000, he's like, yeah, if you live like a local.
Yeah.
But like but you have to realize that living like a local is not like you're going to be eating rice and beans. You're not going out. You're not going to have a car. You're going to be taking the bus everywhere. You're going to be living in some neighborhood with no air conditioner or heater. You're not living your USA lifestyle or Canadian lifestyle or whatever on that $1,000 a month.
Well, I have friends that rent here in Atenas, and they're paying anywhere from 500 to thousands a month. Okay. So even if you're paying like a little studio for 500, there goes your $1,000 a month budget. I think that's a tough one. Like, I would not want to have $125 a week to live on. You could do it. Rice and beans, plantains, pick mangoes up off the street, during mango season. Is that a thing? But no, it's hard work to live like that. If someone would ask me, like, what kind of budget would I need to live in Costa Rica comfortably, I would say if you're going to rent a decent-sized house, you need at least $2,500 a month to live here. You can rent a nice place for probably $700, little two-bedroom house, $600-700, and then, you have $2,000 a month to live on. Yeah, you could do that. But $3,000 would be better,
So, Allie, since you've been out of the U.S. since 2016, what are, say, a few things that you miss about the U.S.? And then what are also on the flip side, what are a few things that you don't miss that you're kind of happy? Yeah, you can take this kind of any order you want.
Ooh. I miss my California wines. Okay. I miss my kids. Being able to hang out with my kids and my grandkids. But I see them, but just not like every day. I do miss being able to go to the store and just everything's in English, and you speak to people, it's English. It's just easy. All the traffic signs are, clearly understood. I guess I miss the day-to-day things, right? The things I can do without the traffic jams, the gun violence, the divisive political atmosphere in the States. That's really about it. There's not a whole lot I miss. Like I said, it's really the politics and the gun violence that I left. I found that troublesome.
So right now you have your residency in Costa Rica. Is that what you said earlier?
Oh no. I don't actually. I've applied for it. It's in Firma de Resolución, which means it's approved, and they're waiting to sign it, and it's been in that position for 5 months.
So do you have to leave every 3 months, or are you on a tourist visa, or what's the process right now?
I'm on a tourist visa. It's expired for 4 months. I'm illegally here. I really can't. They actually just changed the law. You can get a tourist visa for 180 days now.
Right, so it's basically 6 months.
I'm not really concerned because my residency has been approved. It's just, I don't know why it's taken 5 months for them to sign it, but I've just put off going into immigration. I'm probably going to go next week.
So before it was expired, since you've been there for the last, since 2021, So were you leaving every 3 months or before they extended it to
No,
180 or what was?
no, I would leave with an expired visa occasionally. I would try to go visit friends in Nicaragua every 3 months or so, but I wasn't really good about it.
When you leave with an expired visa and come back, do they say anything to you? Or you just kind of pay a fine? I mean, it's not a big deal.
They've never asked me to pay a fine, and they've never said boo to me. They just like go. They're like the border guards, especially if you're crossing the border on land, like you go to Panas Blancas or there's one near Granada. Those guys don't care. There's stamp, adios. You pay the 8 fee and you're gone. You can walk out, turn around, and come back right back through. They'll give you your 180 days as long as you have like a bus ticket to leave the country. Yeah, you have to show them something that you're leaving the country. You have an exit. Now I just have my residency status. So if I leave the country, I can come back. I don't need to have another ticket to leave. I just show them, no, here it's approved. Here's my paperwork. They say, oh, okay. They give me 180 days.
So once you're approved for the residency, then you can stay.
Yeah, the immigration.
Right.
Don't care. But you have to have your paperwork submitted and it has to be that signature step. But then everybody's happy.
Going back a little bit where we were talking about Social Security, actually, I had a former professor, PhD, who wrote like this Bible on Social Security, Wade Pfau, on a podcast. And he says that if you wait till 70 versus taking Social Security at 62, you get 77% more once you factor in COLA or cost of living adjustments. So like for you, that's a big decision that retirees have to make, right? Because you could take it at 62 or anywhere from that to 70. And then I think the break-even point is somewhere around 80, 81. So if you take it at 62, you have to live to at least be 80, 81 to break even on that. What was your decision? You're waiting till you turn 70. What's your decision process on that?
I retired early. I had set aside a budget per year to get me to my corporation's pension, and I'm almost there. And I just decided that I had enough money to live comfortably, that I would max out the Social Security, and I really don't care if I live to the break-even point or not. I hope I do. I did think about my medical history and my family's medical history. Like my dad died when he was 60 from a heart attack, but my mom, God bless her, she's 95 and living in Georgia. She has her own place in a car, so I don't know. And I've thought about the break-even point. But yeah, I just decided I want to max it out. Give me a good really nice combined income, and why not? I don't care if I die before the break-even point. Well, then the U.S. government wins, and I'm dead, kind of thing. So,
well, I mean, it's with people living longer and whatnot, and being healthier nowadays, and living that healthy Tika lifestyle, whatever you want to call it. It's maybe you're. Hedge the bets and wait till you're 70. I don't know. I think that might be a good decision.
I just figure I get the maximum pay then, and I have it. And I think your friend is right. It's a lot more when you compared to 62. Compared to my full retirement age, it's only 28% more. So 28%. That's only for like 3.5 years or something. If someone were to ask me like what I would recommend to them, I would tell them, like I said, just look at your family medical history, and if you can afford to wait and you think you'll live for another 15 years, wait it out. If you could live comfortably and wait it out.
Did you ever think about Colombia or Mexico, Ecuador? Those three particularly are very high, I think, destination spots for retirees.
I thought about Mexico, and I have friends in Mexico that left Nicaragua and they went to Mexico. I go visit them. They are near Puerto Vallarta.
Okay. So that's close to like Cancun, like maybe a half hour away, 45 minutes away, something like that.
Yeah, Puerto Vallarta is a very popular LGBTQ destination. Super popular. And they're in Buceríos, I think it's called. It's nice, but it's so dry and hot. That wouldn't be for me. But I did think about Mexico a bit. I thought about Colombia, didn't think about Ecuador. I wanted to be proximity was part of my selection choice. That's why I thought about Mexico. I thought about Colombia. I didn't want to go any further south. I mean, I've been in Bolivia. I went to Bolivia in 2017. Really cool country, kind of like Nicaragua, but there's a lot of cool stuff to see. Again, it's a long trip.
What was the price difference when your friend moving from Nicaragua to Mexico?
He said it's like probably 20% more expensive. I mean, he sold his house and went there, bought a little lot, built a house, and had enough money to pay for it. So he was happy. You know, he and his wife were happy.
So did he also move from Nicaragua?
Yeah, he was my.
From the for the
He was.
he was your neighbor,
Yeah.
and then did he move from the political situation as well? Is that
Yeah, they moved about a year and a half before I did. In fact, I
okay?
took them to the airport when they were and sold their house and but yeah, they were tired of the politics. It just I think it was the uncertainty of it, like what was going to happen next. When we had the uprising in 2018, April, and the students were protesting, and then they were protesting wildfires on the Caribbean coast, where the indigenous peoples they have an autonomous government, and frankly, Ortega doesn't give a damn about them, and he was going to let them burn. Okay, so the students that Ortega gave free educations to were protesting how they were handling the wildfires. And they had a big protest on the weekend, and that Monday, Ortega and the government increased the cost of Social Security and decreased the benefits. So the elders came out and started protesting the students. And that day, gunshots rang out, and 2 people were shot. And then all hell broke loose. Like, they tore up the roads, the Pan American Highway. They took the bricks out of it and blocked the Pan American Highway off. We had no food in the grocery store in San Juan for 2 weeks. Like, I bought the last 6 cans of tuna fish to feed my dogs with. No gas. And that was when people really decided that, like, this might not be the place for me. And I didn't, like a lot of expats left. They were like, we're going to go to Costa Rica and see what happens. Like, a lot of people went to Costa Rica and just like watched. I stayed. And from April until July, all these protests were going on. You couldn't drive to Managua because they barricaded the roads. 350 people were killed. Terrible. And I stayed the whole time. And then Ortega finally overthrew the rioters and protesters and knocked down all the barricades. And that weekend, they killed 50 people in July. It was Operation Limpieza, right? Operation Clean, right? And then all the leaders fled the country. And then for the next 6 months, there was about 1 execution murder a month that really didn't make the news. And it was people that were highly ranked, heavily involved in the uprising. And they were just found dead, shot in the back of the head. And nobody said boo about it. But, it was Ortega clean the house. So a lot of my friends were like, I think I'm getting out of here. And I stayed, and COVID hit, and then you were kind of stuck. And then I was thinking the whole COVID time, like, I'm going to sell the house and go. And then there was rumors in 2021, we started getting vaccines in Nicaragua. I got one of the first ones. I'm not sure I should have taken it, but I wanted to, get out of the country. There were a lot of rumors amongst the locals, and I knew a lot of the locals, and they said that there are people training in Honduras and in Costa Rica, and there's going to be a war. The elections are going to be in 2021, and there's going to be a war. And that's when I decided, I left November 1st. The elections were like on the 7th or 8th or something. I left. I did not want to be there for the elections. Nothing happened, but I made my choice.
A lot of things that you don't think about before you move to another country, whether that's Central America, South America, Europe, I mean, you name it. But Ali, I appreciate you spending a lot of time with us today. Let's just leave us with a final thought related to travel to Costa Rica or just whatever.
For me, it's just like follow your heart while you have the health. Like if you want to travel and you want to have an adventure, you want to live in a community, do a little bit of research. Understand the culture a little bit, try to get a handle on the language a little bit, but follow your dreams. It's great. I love living out in the United States. I really do. Like, I've met so many neat people. I have so many more friends. It's wonderful. I highly recommend it. But do a little homework up front. That's all I can say.
My dear friends, that is it for this episode of El Podcast. Once again, if you're not yet subscribed, please subscribe on YouTube as well as Rumble. You can also find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts from. We thank you all from the bottom of our hearts for watching and listening, and we will see you on the next episode.